The projector hummed in the conference room as my boss tapped his pen against my report. 3 weeks of late nights, endless research, and careful analysis sat in front of him. Simmons Hartley smiled that cruel smile I'd seen him use on others. But never on me. Not until today. "So, Carrie," he announced to the 30 people crowded around the table, "this is exactly what happens when someone doesn't understand basic market analysis." Laughter rippled through the room. Not loud, but enough. Enough to make my cheeks burn. Enough to make me want to disappear through the floor. I gripped my pen until my knuckles turned white. Every eye in that conference room found me, then quickly looked away. Some faces showed pity. Others showed relief that they weren't the target. Amanda from accounting actually smirked. "I spent 3 weeks on that analysis," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. Simmons waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. 3 weeks on the wrong data set, apparently. We had to completely redo this yesterday to make it presentable. My stomach dropped. He'd changed my presentation without telling me. Then blamed me for his changes in front of everyone. That's when something inside me shifted. My name is Carrie Palmer. I'm 34 years old, and until that moment, I'd spent 8 years at Meridian Analytics believing hard work mattered more than politics. I was wrong. When the meeting finally ended, people filed out quickly. Nobody wanted to make eye contact with the person who'd just been publicly destroyed. Simmons packed up his laptop, whistling softly like nothing had happened. "Don't take it personally, Palmer," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Consider it a teaching moment. You'll thank me someday." I forced a smile. "Of course, Simmons. I appreciate the feedback." Inside, my heart was racing. Not from embarrassment anymore. From something else entirely. Something cold and clear and focused. I'd given this company 8 years. 8 years of staying late while others left early. 8 years of fixing mistakes that weren't mine. 8 years of watching Simmons take credit for work I'd done. And now he'd humiliated me in front of the entire division. I walked back to my desk with my head high. Let them think I was defeated. Let them think I'd learned my lesson. They had no idea what I was really learning. Back at my desk, I opened my email. 17 new messages. Most were from co-workers offering polite sympathy. "Hang in there, Carrie. That was rough. You okay? Don't let him get to you." I deleted every single one without responding. I didn't need sympathy. I needed information. I opened the shared drive and found the presentation file. Then I checked the document history. There it was, clear as day. Simmons had edited the file at 2:17 in the morning, hours after I'd sent him the final version. He'd deliberately changed my data analysis to make it look wrong. Then he'd corrected it in front of everyone, making himself look like the hero who'd saved the day. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a setup. I sat back in my chair and stared at my computer screen. For 8 years, I'd told myself that keeping my head down and doing good work would be enough. That eventually, people would notice my contributions. But Simmons had just taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. In this company, it didn't matter how good your work was. It mattered who controlled the narrative. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the meeting in my mind. The laughter. The smirk on Simmons's face. The way everyone had looked at me with pity. But mostly, I thought about the pattern. This wasn't the first time Simmons had done something like this. I'd watched him do it to others over the years. Marcus had left the company 6 months ago after Simmons blamed him for a client loss that wasn't his fault. Vanessa had been passed over for promotion 3 times while less qualified people moved up. The difference was that I'd always assumed if I just worked harder, stayed loyal, and proved myself, I'd be safe. Today proved I was never safe. Around 3 in the morning, I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I created a new folder on my personal cloud drive and labeled it documentation. Then I started going through every email, every project file, every meeting note from the past 8 years. If Simmons wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. But I wouldn't play his way. I'd play smarter. The next Monday, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. I smiled at people in the hallway. I made small talk by the coffee machine. I sat through the morning meeting and took careful notes. Simmons barely looked at me. He was too busy praising his favorite, Lauren Mitchell, for a client presentation that I'd actually written most of. She blushed and thanked him, shooting me an apologetic glance. I smiled back at her. It wasn't her fault. She was just playing the game the way Simmons had taught her to play it. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and continued my real work. I wasn't preparing reports anymore. I was preparing something else entirely. I started tracking patterns. Every time Simmons took credit for someone else's work, I documented it. Every time he blamed someone for a problem he'd created, I saved the evidence. Every time he made a promise he didn't keep, I recorded the date and the witnesses. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was emotional and messy. This was something different. This was strategic. 2 weeks after the quarterly review, I signed up for a leadership certification program. It cost $2,000 I didn't really have, but I paid it anyway. The program met on Saturday mornings, which meant sacrificing my weekends. But I'd already sacrificed 8 years to this company. What was a few more months? I learned about organizational behavior, conflict resolution, and performance management. I studied how companies conducted internal audits and investigations. I memorized employment law and workplace ethics policies. Simmons thought I was just a good analyst. He had no idea I was becoming something more dangerous. Someone who understood the system better than he did. At work, I kept my head down. I did exactly what was asked of me, nothing more, nothing less. When Simmons made his usual jokes at staff meetings, I smiled politely. When he took credit for my ideas, I didn't object. People started whispering that I'd lost my spark. That the quarterly review had broken something in me. Let them think that. Broken things were underestimated. Underestimated things could move freely. 6 weeks after the humiliation, something interesting happened. Denise Rowan, one of the senior directors, stopped by my desk. "Carrie, do you have a minute?" I looked up from my computer. Denise was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and known for not suffering fools. She rarely came down to our floor unless something important was happening. "Of course," I said. She gestured toward the empty conference room. Once we were inside with the door closed, she got straight to the point. "That quarterly review was inappropriate," she said. "I've heard about what happened." I kept my expression neutral. It was just feedback. "I'm working on improving." Denise shook her head. "It was a power play. Simmons does this when he feels threatened. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I met her eyes. "What can I do about it?" "Document everything," she said quietly. "Keep records. Be patient. Men like Simmons always overreach eventually. When he does, you need to be ready." After she left, I sat in that conference room for a long time. Denise had just confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't about my performance. It was about Simmons feeling threatened. Which meant I was doing something right. 3 months passed. I completed my leadership certification with honors. I continued documenting every questionable decision Simmons made. And I started making myself more visible to upper management. Not in obvious ways. I didn't want Simmons to notice. But when the executive team needed someone to help with a special project, I volunteered. When they asked for input on process improvements, I provided detailed, well-researched recommendations. I made sure my name started appearing in contexts that had nothing to do with Simmons's department. I was building credibility that existed outside of his shadow. Meanwhile, Simmons grew more confident. He'd humiliated me once and I'd stayed quiet, so he assumed he could keep doing it. His jokes at my expense became a regular feature of Monday meetings. His dismissive attitude toward my work became more pronounced. He was digging his own grave. He just didn't know it yet. The documentation folder on my cloud drive grew thicker. Emails where he took credit for others' work. Meeting notes where he'd made promises he never kept. Time-stamps showing he'd edited reports to make himself look better. Everything dated. Everything verified. Everything saved in multiple locations. 4 months after the quarterly review, a project lead position opened up in our department. It was the logical next step in my career path. I'd been doing the work of a project lead for years without the title or the pay. I submitted my application along with a detailed portfolio of my accomplishments. Projects I'd managed. Clients I'd retained. Problems I'd solved. The interview went well. The hiring panel seemed impressed. One of them even said, "You're clearly overqualified for your current role." I allowed myself to hope. 2 weeks later, Simmons called me into his office. Lauren was there too, smiling nervously. "We've decided to give the project lead position to Lauren," Simmons announced. "She's shown real initiative lately, and we think she's ready for the next level." Lauren's initiative was work I'd coached her through. Projects where I'd done most of the heavy lifting while she got the face time with clients. "I see," I said calmly. "Can I ask what I need to improve for next time?" Simmons leaned back in his chair. "It's not about improvement, Carrie. Sometimes it's just not your year. Keep doing what you're doing. Your time will come. My time will come." The same thing he'd been telling me for 8 years. I congratulated Lauren and walked out of his office with my head high. But inside, something had crystallized. That night, I updated my documentation with the details of the promotion decision. I noted that Lauren had worked at the company for 3 years compared to my 8. I recorded that 5 of the projects on her application had actually been my work. Then I did something I'd been putting off. I scheduled a meeting with the company's employee relations department. Not to file a complaint. Not yet. But to understand the process. The representative, Kyle Henderson, was professional and straightforward. He explained how internal investigations worked. What kind of evidence was needed. How the company handled claims of favoritism and credit theft. Hypothetically, I said, if someone had documentation of a pattern of behavior over several years, how would they submit that? Kyle studied me carefully. Hypothetically, they'd want to make sure their documentation was thorough, time-stamped, and could be independently verified. And they'd want to be prepared for the investigation to take time. These things don't happen overnight. I thanked him and left. But now I understood the roadmap. I knew exactly what I needed to prepare. And I was already halfway there. 2 weeks later, Denise called me again. This time, she wanted to meet for coffee outside the office. We sat in a quiet corner of a cafe 3 blocks from Meridian. Denise stirred her coffee slowly before speaking. "I'm going to tell you something that doesn't leave this table," she said. "Corporate is conducting a routine audit of all departments next quarter. They're looking at budget allocation, resource management, and leadership effectiveness." My pulse quickened. All departments, she confirmed. Including Simmons's. And they're going to need analysts to help process the data. She looked at me directly. "Your name came up. You have the strongest analytical background in the company, and you've completed compliance training. Would you be interested in being part of the audit team?" I kept my face neutral, but inside, my mind was racing. An audit would mean access to budget records, expense reports, and allocation decisions. Everything I'd been documenting informally would become official. Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? I asked. "Since I work in Simmons's department." "Not if you maintain objectivity and follow protocols," Denise said. "Corporate specifically wants people who understand the department structures. You'd be one of 3 analysts on the team." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the moment settle. "I'd be honored to help." Denise smiled. "Good. Keep this quiet until the official announcement. But start preparing yourself." The next 2 months were the longest of my life. I continued working under Simmons, smiling through his condescension, while secretly preparing for the audit. I studied every compliance policy Meridian had ever issued. I memorized budget protocols and expense approval processes. I learned how to spot irregularities in financial documentation. And I continued documenting Simmons's behavior with even more precision. At work, he grew more confident. He started taking longer lunches. He began arriving late and leaving early. He'd won, after all. He'd humiliated me, passed me over for promotion, and I'd stayed quiet. He thought I was beaten. Lauren, meanwhile, was struggling in her new role. She came to my desk constantly with questions. Problems she couldn't solve. Clients who weren't responding well to her approach. I helped her every time, always kindly. Not because I was being noble, but because I needed her to see what Simmons couldn't. That leadership without substance eventually crumbles. I was playing a long game now. And every piece was moving exactly where I needed it to be. The audit was announced on a Tuesday morning in early September. A company-wide email explained that corporate was conducting routine operational reviews across all departments. Nothing to worry about. Standard procedure. Please cooperate fully with the audit team. I watched Simmons read the email during our Monday meeting. His jaw tightened slightly, but he recovered quickly. Nothing to worry about here, he announced to the team. Our department's numbers are solid. This will be quick and painless. Lauren looked nervous. Amanda from accounting whispered something to the person next to her. I simply took notes like I always did. Nobody knew I was on the audit team yet. That announcement would come later. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and opened my documentation folder one more time. Everything was organized chronologically, cross-referenced, and backed up in 3 different locations. I'd spent 6 months preparing for this moment. Now it was finally here. And Simmons had no idea what was coming. The audit began the following Monday. The team was introduced in a brief meeting. Me, plus 2 analysts from other divisions. We'd be reviewing budget allocation, expense reports, project timelines, and resource management across all departments. When my name was announced as part of the audit team, I saw Simmons's head snap up. His eyes found mine across the room. For the first time in 6 months, I saw something in his expression that wasn't confidence. It was concern. After the meeting, he pulled me aside in the hallway. "You're on the audit team," he asked, trying to sound casual. "That's quite an opportunity." "I'm honored to be selected," I replied evenly. My analytical background apparently made me a strong candidate. "I'm sure you'll be objective," he said, watching my face carefully. "No personal feelings involved." "Of course not," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I only deal in facts and data. You taught me that." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. That's good." As he walked away, I allowed myself the smallest smile. He was nervous. And he should be. Because I had 6 months of facts and data waiting for him. The audit moved slowly at first. We started with budget reviews, comparing allocated funds against actual spending. Most departments were clean. Minor irregularities here and there, but nothing significant. Then we got to Simmons's department. The first red flag was subtle. A vendor payment that seemed slightly high for the services rendered. I flagged it for deeper review and moved on. The second was more obvious. Multiple expense reports for client dinners at restaurants that didn't match the clients listed. I cross-referenced with the client's own records. They had no record of those meetings. The third was damning. Consulting fees paid to a company that, when I researched it, barely existed. A shell website with no employee listings, no physical address, and no actual services described. I documented everything carefully, without emotion, and submitted my findings to the audit lead. Not speculation. Not accusations. Just data that didn't add up. Within a week, the audit focus shifted heavily toward Simmons's department. More questions. More document requests. More irregularities surfacing. And I kept working, methodically, calmly, letting the numbers tell their story. 3 weeks into the audit, Simmons started changing. The confident swagger disappeared. He snapped at people during meetings. He questioned decisions he'd previously approved. He began leaving early and looking exhausted. Lauren came to my desk one afternoon, her eyes red. "He yelled at me today," she whispered. "In front of everyone. Over something that wasn't even my fault." I looked at her sympathetically. "He's under a lot of stress right now. He's never been like this before," she said. "I don't understand what changed." I didn't tell her that what changed was consequences. Simmons had spent years operating without accountability. Now someone was actually checking his work. And he couldn't handle it. The audit team found more issues. Unauthorized budget transfers. Projects billed at twice their actual cost, with the difference unaccounted for. Resource allocations that favored certain employees without merit-based justification. Every irregularity was documented, cross-referenced, and submitted to corporate. No commentary. No personal opinions. Just facts that couldn't be disputed. Simmons tried calling a department meeting to address morale issues. His hand shook slightly as he held his coffee cup. "We're all under scrutiny right now," he said. "But we need to stay united. Trust me, this will blow over." Nobody looked convinced anymore. 4 weeks into the audit, Human Resources began conducting confidential interviews. They started with Lauren, then moved through other department members. When they called me in, I brought my own documentation. "You've submitted several findings about expense irregularities," the HR director, Patricia Walsh, said. "Can you walk me through how you discovered these?" I laid out my analysis calmly. Data points. Timestamps. Cross-references with client records and vendor information. Everything I'd found during the audit, plus additional context from my own documentation. Patricia took notes carefully. "You've been very thorough." "I'm an analyst," I replied. "Thorough is my job." "Some of these issues date back several years," she observed. "Before the audit began, had you noticed these patterns?" I chose my words carefully. I'd noticed some inconsistencies over time, but I wasn't in a position to investigate formally until the audit. She nodded slowly. "And you maintained documentation throughout?" "I always keep detailed records of projects I work on," I said. "It's helped me track patterns and avoid mistakes." After an hour, Patricia thanked me and said they'd be in touch. As I left, I felt the weight of 6 months of preparation finally paying off. Not revenge. Just accountability. The following week, Simmons's behavior grew more erratic. He called emergency meetings that went nowhere. He sent emails late at night questioning decisions from months ago. He began micromanaging everything, which only made the team more frustrated. Meanwhile, the audit findings moved up the chain. I heard through Denise that corporate was very interested in our department's irregularities. Questions were being asked at the highest levels. Simmons tried to control the narrative. He sent a department-wide email praising everyone's hard work and dedication. He bought lunch for the team and gave a speech about weathering difficult times together. But his eyes kept finding me across the conference room. And each time, I saw the same question in them. How much did I know? The answer was simple. I knew everything. Every expense he'd fudged. Every credit he'd stolen. Every person he'd blamed for his mistakes. Every promise he'd broken. And now, finally, other people knew too. 6 weeks after the audit began, Simmons was called into an all-day meeting with HR and corporate leadership. He left his office at 9 in the morning and didn't return. At 4 o'clock, an email went out to the department. Effective immediately, Simmons-Hartley had been placed on administrative leave pending the completion of an internal investigation. In the interim, Denise Rowan would oversee our department directly. The office went silent. Then, slowly, people started whispering. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. Amanda from accounting actually smiled. Lauren came to my desk, pale-faced. "Did you know this was coming?" "I knew the audit was serious," I said honestly. "But personnel decisions aren't my area." That night, I got a call from Denise. "Can you come to the office early tomorrow? I need to discuss something with you." I arrived at 7:30 the next morning. Denise was already there, looking tired but focused. "The investigation is expanding," she said. "Corporate found enough irregularities to warrant a full review. Simmons is finished here, though he doesn't know it yet." She paused, studying my face. "They're going to need someone to manage your department during the transition. Someone who knows the work, has the team's respect, and can't be accused of being part of the previous leadership structure." My heart started beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying I recommended you for interim department manager. Corporate approved it an hour ago. The announcement went out that afternoon. Effective immediately, I would serve as interim department manager while the investigation continued and a permanent replacement was determined. I read the email 3 times to make sure it was real. After 8 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and humiliated, I was being given the authority I'd always deserved. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. This was interim, not permanent. I still had to prove myself. My first action as manager was to call a department meeting. Everyone filed in nervously, unsure what to expect. I stood at the front of the same conference room where Simmons had humiliated me 6 months ago. I know this is an uncertain time, I began. But our work continues. Our clients still need us. Our projects still have deadlines. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to focus on doing excellent work. We're going to support each other. And we're going to rebuild trust, both within this team and with upper management. I paused, looking at each face. I'm not here to be anyone's friend or enemy. I'm here to do the job right. If you work hard and act with integrity, we'll get along fine. Questions? Lauren raised her hand tentatively. What about the investigation? HR will handle that independently, I said. Our job is to focus on our work. Let them do theirs. After the meeting, several people thanked me quietly. The relief in the room was palpable. Finally, someone was leading instead of playing political games. The next 2 months were intense. I restructured our workflows to be more efficient. I redistributed projects based on actual skills rather than favoritism. I implemented transparent communication about deadlines and expectations. The department's performance improved dramatically. Client satisfaction scores went up. Projects were delivered on time. Team morale lifted. Upper management noticed. Denise sent me encouraging emails. Patricia from HR mentioned in passing that the feedback about my leadership had been universally positive. Meanwhile, the investigation into Simmons concluded. He was formally terminated for misuse of company resources, expense fraud, and violation of ethical standards. The details were kept confidential, but everyone knew enough. His office was cleaned out. His name removed from the directory. Within days, it was like he'd never been there. Lauren had transferred to a different department, wanting a fresh start. She'd apologized to me privately for not speaking up sooner. I told her I understood. Fear kept many people silent. The shell company that had received consulting fees was traced back to Simmons's brother-in-law. The fake expense reports had funded personal vacations. The budget irregularities had padded his bonus calculations. Everything I'd documented had been verified, investigated, and confirmed. Justice wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, quiet, and thorough. Just like me. 3 months after taking over as interim manager, I was called into a meeting with Denise and 2 corporate executives I'd never met before. Carrie, Denise began, we've completed our assessment of the department's transition. Your performance as interim manager has exceeded expectations. The team's output is up 23%. Client retention has improved. And every person we interviewed praised your leadership. One of the executives leaned forward. We'd like to offer you the permanent position of department manager. Not interim. Full authority, full compensation package, and a seat in senior leadership meetings. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph exactly. More like validation. I accept, I said. Thank you for the opportunity. After the meeting, I walked back to my office. My office now. The one that used to belong to Simmons. His nameplate was gone, replaced with mine. I sat at the desk and looked around at the space. 8 years of being overlooked had led to this. 6 months of careful documentation and strategic patience had led to this. Not revenge. Not even really justice. Just the natural consequence of staying calm while someone else self-destructed. I pulled out my phone and texted Denise a simple message, "Thank you for believing in me." Her response came quickly, "I didn't make you a leader. You already were one." I just gave you the opportunity to show it. My first week as permanent department manager, I made some changes. I instituted a transparent promotion process based on measurable criteria. I created a mentorship program so newer employees could learn from experienced ones. I established regular feedback sessions so people could voice concerns before they became problems. Most importantly, I made it clear that credit would go where it was earned. If someone did good work, their name would be on it. No more stolen projects. No more political games. The department transformed. People who'd been quiet for years started speaking up with ideas. Projects that had been stagnating suddenly moved forward. The energy shifted from fear-based to purpose-driven. I hired 2 new analysts to fill gaps in our team. Both were talented people who'd been overlooked at other companies because they didn't play politics well. They fit in perfectly. Amanda from accounting stopped by my office one afternoon. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I laughed during that quarterly review. I was just relieved it wasn't me getting humiliated. But that was wrong. I'm sorry." "I appreciate that," I said. "And I understand. Fear makes people do things they're not proud of." She nodded. "For what it's worth, everyone's saying this is the best the department's been in years." After she left, I pulled up that old presentation file one more time. The one Simmons had sabotaged. I'd kept it all this time as a reminder. Then I deleted it. I didn't need reminders anymore. 6 months into my permanent position, I was invited to present at the company's annual leadership conference. The same event where Simmons used to speak every year, taking credit for work his team had done. This time, I presented our department's turnaround story. Not by focusing on what had gone wrong before, but by highlighting what was going right now. I talked about transparent leadership, merit-based recognition, and building trust through consistency. I shared specific metrics showing our improvement. I gave credit to my team for their hard work. After the presentation, several managers approached me asking for advice. How had I turned things around so quickly? What was my secret? "There's no secret," I told them. "Treat people with respect. Give credit where it's due. Make decisions based on what's right, not what's political. And document everything, because accountability matters." One young manager, facing her own difficult boss, asked quietly, "How did you stay patient through everything?" I thought about that quarterly review. The humiliation. The anger. The long months of documentation and strategic planning. "I stayed patient because I knew anger wouldn't change anything," I said. "But preparation would. So I prepared. And when the opportunity came, I was ready." 1 year after that quarterly review, I walked into the same conference room where Simmons had tried to destroy me. The projector hummed softly as I set up my presentation. The same 30 people who'd watched me get humiliated were gathering around the table. But everything was different now. I stood at the front of the room as department manager, presenting our annual results. Our numbers were strong. Our client satisfaction scores were the highest in company history. Our team retention rate was 96%. As I clicked through the slides, I caught a few faces that looked familiar. People who'd laughed that day. People who'd looked away. People who'd thought I was finished. They were paying attention now. Not because they felt guilty, but because the work spoke for itself. When I finished, the applause was genuine. Denise smiled from the back of the room. Patricia from HR gave me a thumbs up. After everyone filed out, I stood alone in that conference room for a moment. The same space where I'd been humiliated. The same projector. The same table. But I wasn't the same person. I'd learned that revenge wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about becoming so undeniable that their opinion of you stopped mattering. I gathered my materials and walked out of the conference room. My team was waiting with questions about next quarter's projects. Life moved forward. And I moved with it, finally standing exactly where I belonged.